My name is Nara Murillo. I'm the host of Agewell Avenue podcast, and my co host is Barbara Slingloff.
On this show, we talk about navigating healthcare, housing, investing, and advocating for our seniors.
Nara, in our last podcast, you were sharing about what it was like to grow up in Armenia and what it was like when you were young and your journey in school and what your parents did and your family. Why don't you share with us about what it was like to actually make the journey and come to the US?
Yeah, so I think challenge with Armenia not wanting us to leave, and paperwork took like 6 to 8 months, and the acceptance paperwork from US I think was only good for like a year. So just trying to figure all of that out, having the paperwork, the acceptance from US, but at the same time the way it works is, even though US had accepted us, Armenia still had to release us. So where we were having the issue was that Armenia wasn't letting us go because of the way that the paperwork was done, and how my father's sister that was basically inviting us here was a stepsister. So Armenia was having some sort of issue with that. And so had to come. So we ended up basically leaving Armenia on a tourist visa just to be able to leave the country. And so because of all of that and just the, urgency to figure all this stuff out, because we only had a certain amount of time, it was really stressful, and we had to sell our house. It was just, going through the process of it all. It was an experience, right? And then also just all the feelings, right? You're coming to a brand new country, you don't know the language, right? And we had to kind of start all over again. And so leaving behind my friends, and so it's just a lot of emotion, right? And just stressful of the unknown. What are we going to do? How are we going to work? How, we don't even speak the language, and all of these things. So it was really stressful time. And I think for me, it was harder because I was older. I was 14 years old. So, for someone at that age, you understand a lot of things. I mean, I was raised 14 years in Armenia. So, but we ended up obviously getting the tourist passport, and we could only, I want to say, bring two suitcases because we were coming as tourists. So pretty much we had to sell a lot of our things back home. So figuring out what am I going to take with me. My parents, were basically telling me, don't pack too much. We can't look like we're, going to another country and not coming back. So basically I had to travel like I was going somewhere for a short amount of time. So I basically packed, I think, one pair of shoe and two outfits and just undergarments, some undergarments, and pretty much I gave away everything else to cousins and family members and neighbors. We were just pretty much giving it out. So from there, I I mean, it was just, I remember just the stress of it all and just anxiety, us going to the airport, trying to leave with a tourist passport and not get flagged, right? What's going on? Why are so it was just all of that emotion. And, we finally passed through customs and security. So we flew from Armenia to France. So that's where our layover was. and then from France to US. And we ended up going to, when we came here, we ended up going to my dad's uncle's house. And so we were basically in like a 1,600 square foot house. Um, and his uncle lived in La Crescenta. And so we came there, and I remember, because back home, the times when I came, Barbara, it was so hard. It was like we didn't have any electricity at that time. It was just, we were most of the time on candlelight. And whenever we would get light, it was very short period of time. So we had to do everything in that very short period of time. So when we came here and we landed in the US and I saw all the lights, it was just it was just like this feeling of, oh my goodness, I'm no longer going to have those experiences anymore. You know, when you're under the candlelight, when you're not able to do a lot of things. And so it was just, even though I was really anxious and nervous and all those feelings, but at the same time, excited at the same time, like, that's behind me now. And I don't have to worry about those things anymore, you know? So, but after coming here and us going to my dad's uncle's house, we were pretty much in their, like, we were sleeping in their living room, because it was, you know, his uncle's family was there with two daughters, and they used to live with them as well. So, you know, after a few days, um my dad's uncle's family wasn't the best per se. They were not very nice. And so his uncle's son was already married at the time and had two children. And so he decided to just take us over to his house. So we ended up going to his house in Tahunga, which was about, I would say, maybe 15 minutes away. It wasn't that far from each other, from his uncle's house to his cousin's house. So we ended up going there, and it was about, I would say, maybe 1,300 square feet. So one bedroom was for the three of us, my dad, my mom, and myself. So we would basically sleep in that one room. And I was on the floor, no mattress, and stayed there for about 2 weeks. And it was the same thing at his uncle's house. We were still like sleeping on the ground, you know, and basically just had a blanket, and we just had our one blanket over us and just our pillows. That was it.
Wow.
And it was really uncomfortable. I mean, it was to a point where we weren't even feeling comfortable eating at their house, you know, so because they're just were not very welcoming. It was just super, super difficult. But we also had other relatives, and my dad had other cousins, and you know, they were able to help us out with applying for Medi-Cal, Medicaid, you know, or whatever, Medi-Cal, I think, at the time, and welfare. That's what it was. It was welfare at the time. And so, because we didn't have any income coming in until we were able to, you know, dad was able to get a job, and, you know, mom was able to work, and then eventually myself. But, you know, in the meantime, it was almost like we needed that income coming in. So, and also my future father-in-law helped us get into an apartment in La Crescenta. And I remember, even though we were struggling and things were so hard, and, you know, he helped us out to get some kitchen, you know, things like dishes. And I remember him getting us like this old couch, you know, it was an older couch, but we were able to actually open it and you could sleep on it. So, so we were sleeping on that, mom and I, and then dad was sleeping on the floor. So it was just, you know, we were just making it work. But the apartment had this little nook in where the kitchen was, and there was like a little table with a little chair thing that you could sit on. And so we would just, you know, sit there, and right behind us it was this beautiful mountain. You know, La Crescenta is very mountainous, right? So it was this beautiful mountain, and we would just sit and just stare at this mountain, because the views were just beautiful, and it just gave us some with all of this chaos, it gave us some peace. You know what I mean? So, and I think what impressed me was how big and beautiful this mountain was, because it's just like you could not see the end. And it was almost like this huge mountain. And then we're like in the deep, at the bottom of like where the apartment was, right? So, and we were there for about 6 months. We lived there for about 6 months. And I enrolled in junior high at the time. I went to school for like 5 months there. It was Rosemont Junior High School. And I didn't speak any English. And it was taking us, at the time, we didn't have a car. So we had to walk everywhere. And it was taking us about a hour one way to walk to school. And then my mom used to walk me to school for an hour, and then she would come back home. And then when it was time for me to leave school, she would walk up to the school and then walk back with me. So she was doing about 4 hours of walking a day.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then when I enrolled in school, I was placed in the wrong grade because of the transition. They weren't really sure. There was this particular school, even though there was a lot of Armenians at the time coming in, but this particular school didn't really have a lot of Armenians. So they weren't really, they didn't really know which grade I needed to be in, and just to transition from, back home to here. And so they ended up placing me in seventh grade. And I was supposed to be in the eighth grade. So, so then we ended up moving to Glendale, into a townhouse. It was a 3-bedroom townhouse. My godparents came over from Armenia with their 2 kids. So, our families lived together because they were new and they needed help. And so we ended up living together for a little bit, just for them to kind of get back on their feet as well. Because we almost had all of our things kind of lined up at that point. I was, going to school, and we were getting some assistance from the government. So, just trying to help them out to kind of get themselves situated as well. So, so when enrolling into school in Glendale, I found out I was enrolled in the wrong grade. So they said, no, they originally enrolled you in the wrong grade. You should have been in eighth grade. So they put me in ninth grade. So I literally jumped the grade and went into ninth
Oh
grade.
my.
So I know. And at the time, that school, it was Roosevelt Junior High School in Glendale, and they had 7th to 9th grade was junior high school. So I still needed to be in junior high school and ninth grade. So, so after I got enrolled, I at the time I was already speaking English. I was very much learning and trying to pick up, watching TV a lot. I was really trying to work on my speech, the way I enunciated things, and just to be sure that I didn't really have an accent, because I had a lot of friends that came here around the same time as I did, but they had a lot of them had a really thick accent, and I worked really hard to not have that. And I think it was one of those things that really, the reason why I was so focused on that, because I was determined to go to places, right? Whether it was going to be the impact that I was going to make, or the career I was going to choose, or whatever that was. Because a lot of my dad's cousins would always, when I would ask them questions about college, about certain things, school, they would always tell me that you won't really get anywhere because you don't speak English. And so I really almost had something to prove. It was one of those things where I am going to do it, and I'm going to show you that I did it. It was just one of those things. And I was already a driven person anyway. I mean, I would never, lose any opportunity that I got, because to me, that was, an opportunity that I would never have back home. So I never
Right.
took it for granted. and until today, I'm blessed for everything I have, and I'm just grateful and just appreciative of everything that I was able to accomplish, and so it was just, for me, it was just a motivator even more, right? For me to be able to be the best that I can possibly be. So
I
when
can see where your investment in yourself really starts to take hold, because you share that you enrolled in seventh grade, and then you're trying to establish yourself there at a school, and you don't speak a lot of English, and then they find out you're in the wrong grade and they move you to ninth grade. And then just at that age, what we need to do socially is connect to people. And if language is already a struggle, but you're learning and you're moving from one grade, and those people that you're connecting with are now gone, and you skip a grade and there's all these different people that you don't know, you found yourself, it seems to be, in a lot of those types of situations, even early on in your growing
Yeah,
up.
and it was super super tough because I didn't speak the language, and junior high is the hardest grade. Everybody thinks that they just graduated elementary school, so they all think they know everything, and kids are really cruel. They used to bully me. They used to put their feet on my clothes every time I would put my clothes underneath my desk. They would like wipe their feet on my clothes. They would, like if I would walk to put the paper at the teacher's desk, they would put their foot out so that I would trip and fall. And all I knew how to protect myself, as I talked about, was this is what my dad taught me. I needed to protect myself. So what I would do is, because I didn't speak the language, I would just fight. So I would hit kids, because I just didn't know how else to protect myself, because I couldn't protect myself by speech, right? So I had to protect myself somehow. So I got suspended a few times, and from school, but it was just part of the learning process. I had to show them that they would not be able to bully me even though I didn't speak the language, so they knew that they couldn't really go there with me per se after a few times, right, of me getting suspended. So it's just a really cruel age at that time, and just trying to go through all those changes and changing schools on top of that. So it was like change after change after change, so it was just super difficult. But eventually what ended up happening is, I my godparents moved out in February, and then we moved back to La Crescenta. So as I'm in ninth grade. I don't finish ninth grade. Um, I once we moved to La Crescenta, I ended up going to high school. Ninth grade was high school in La Crescenta, so I went to Crescenta Valley
Mm.
High, and I had to make sure that, because I came in kind of later on in the second semester, I only had, I think, maybe 3 months left from ninth grade. So I had to catch up with all of my classes and to graduate on time, because I was in high school now, and so I had to have certain amount of classes and certain classes that I needed to take. So so I ended up basically taking every extra course, extra period, and summer school, whatever I could do to catch up, and my education, and just all of the moving and all of the changes that I went through. I had to make sure that I was graduating on time.
What a
So
challenge, for sure. You
yeah.
mentioned that your godparents moved out, and I know that as you've been sharing about your journey, that families very much were helping each other, and it was also a financial help. So when you're, I know you were helping your godparents, but I'm sure just having extra people and pulling resources together, um, how did you make that work once your godparents moved out? It was just you and your parents now.
Yeah, it was majority of it was us. Obviously, we were paying for. They would help out. They would buy like food and stuff. For the house because we were all obviously living together, and there was three of us and four of them. But I think that because we had gone through the experiences we had gone through with my uncle, we never wanted them to feel that they were a burden. So it was always about we would just do whatever it took, and we were just there helping each other out and getting through the time that they needed for them to get back on their feet and get everything else situated. So we never wanted them to feel like they were a burden for us. So we always made sure that everything was great and they were feeling good, and they weren't feeling stressed with living with us. So it's just the extra. Absolutely, we're always helping people. And because I come from a very much a family that was a large family, my dad's side of the family, his dad's side of the family, there were 12 kids. So there was a lot of cousins and their kids and everybody else. So my mom's side was five sisters, so I had a lot of cousins on my mom's side as well. So but it was that's what it was about. It was about helping each other. It was about being there for each other. We took care of each other as family. So this is what I know. And I think growing up, that's pretty much what I saw is as family we take care of each other.
And I
So
think you seeing your parents, I'm sure you wanted to be helpful to them if you saw
yeah.
them struggling, right? Tell
Yeah,
us a
so when
little bit about the ways that you helped them.
yeah, so when we moved back to La Crescenta, I so prior to us actually leaving La Crescenta, or was it when we came back? I think it was when I came back. I was working. I actually got a job. I got a job to help out mom and dad. And I think it was prior to us leaving to Glendale. I was already working to help them out so that they didn't feel the burden of me. And so I was actually working at he was this photographer that was basically paying out of his account, and we were doing school pictures. So I used to basically make the packets, and then we used to make the buttons. Do you remember the buttons they would have with the picture on it? So that's
Yes.
what I was actually making, right? So and then when we came back to La Crescenta, I actually ended up uh, working again. I started working again. And, at that time, my mom already started going to school. And I just didn't never wanted to be having them worry about me. So she started school and she was trying to learn, English. And she had no job at that time. She was just going to school. And then obviously we were trying to buy a car so that she could actually drive to school. So I think I was like 16 when I started working at a retirement home. One of my friends was working at a retirement home, so she said, "Nara, we're hiring if you want to, get a job here in the kitchen." And I was like, absolutely. I would love to work with older people, right? I was always surrounded by older people. My dad's uncles and aunts were all older, so I always enjoyed them. And so for me, I just started working at the retirement home. But prior to that, I did go to job fairs. I did, try to get into like retail environment as well. Because at that time, I was just looking for a job. And I was trying to buy a car for myself as well, right? Because I was going to be getting my driver's license. And so my dad was teaching me how to drive. And so, and my dad at that time had already gotten a job and he was working. He was actually driving a semi, and he was doing short distances and some long distances. But, it was interesting because, when when he started driving, he told my mom that we no longer needed welfare. He did not want us to be getting welfare anymore. He cut everything off He cut Medi-Cal off. He cut everything off. And so he said, I don't want to be reporting to anyone. I don't want to be, I'm going to be, basically the provider, and this is how it's going to be. We don't need any assistance. We got the assistance we needed. We're getting back on our feet. We don't need any of this. So he basically had my mom cancel everything. So, and then when I got my job at the retirement home, because retail was difficult, they wanted you to have experience, and this is what we always talk about, right? How do you get experience if you never give anybody an opportunity, right? So, but it was okay because I was so excited and I was so happy to work at the retirement home with the older folks. I always enjoyed them. I always loved hearing their stories. So I ended up getting a job at the retirement home in the dining room as a waitress, and I saved enough money to buy myself a car. And I remember it was so interesting because I started paying attention to the patterns of how each resident was ordering, and a lot of them I started memorizing everything that they were eating because it was so consistent,
Wow.
and I already knew what they wanted. It was, even though they filled out a menu, but I already knew, so I just started kind of learning and knowing their stories, and always remembering what made them smile. So I would always kind of bring that up and try to have conversations with them, and they always just loved having conversations with me. So it was a lot. It was so much enjoyment for me. And then after my dad, taught me how to drive, and he I ended up buying a car for myself after I started working. And so, and my dad ended up, his cousin owned a body shop, and so he was able to fix the car for me. So I was super excited that I was no longer going to be using number 11, my my legs. So I was actually going to have four wheels that I was going to be able to drive myself. So I was super excited about that. And it was interesting because in high school I had Armenian friends. So it was interesting how we all came at the same time, but we were so different, and just how we communicated, how we um, just everything, right? How we moved, how we studied, everything was different. At the time I was in high school, I was learning ESL at the time, because I didn't speak that well of an English yet, even though I did. And then eventually I went into, higher English grades. I graduated from ESL, but it was good. I made it. I did well for myself and learned and was able to speak pretty well, I would say. I mean, there are certain things that I probably have, certain words I say. There's some accent, obviously, but I think I was happy with my outcome. So,
And
but
everyone
just
remembers their very first car. Like, what was your very first car? You bought it for
mm,
yourself, so that's even more
I
memorable. But
I did. I
what
remember
was it? What did you buy?
Dad ended up buying, well, I had a budget. I only had $2,000 that I had saved. So at the time, my dad and his cousin bought it at the auction. So the car was obviously needed a little bit of fixing, but they bought it at the auction for $1,800. I remember how much they bought it for. And so dad actually helped me to pay for it, for the fixing, because at the same time he was also helping too, because he could do things like that as well. So it was just the material, really, that whatever paint or whatnot they needed, that he helped me a little bit to pay for that. But yeah, it was a Mazda 323 coupe.
Nice. What color was it?
It was a gray color, and it had the rims and everything on it. I was driving in style, let's just put it that way. But I was just excited. I didn't care what the car was. I was just excited that I was able to actually drive and take myself from point A to point B. I didn't have to rely on anyone. I didn't have to bother my parents. I was pretty independent. So it's just one of those things.
And so you're 16, you've got a car, you've got a job, and you probably are getting close to graduating high school. Tell us about that piece.
Yeah, so I was actually 17 when I graduated high school, and then I started college I went to Pasadena City College, and and I actually was also working at the same time. So when I went to college, I was majoring in biology, and then at 18, I went to work for like this um, mom and pop shop that was like a pharmacy. So basically, I was, because my dad and I would always talk about what I was going to do. And so dad was always telling me, pick something that you can give back and that you can help people. And so he was always telling me, "Oh, what about dentist?" And I was like, "No, Dad, I am not getting into anyone's mouth. That is not one thing. That's one thing that I will not be doing." But I said, "Anything else, I will definitely look into." And then he said, "What about a pharmacist?" And I was like, "You know what? That sounds good." I was like, "Let me look into that." So I started working in this pharmacy, and so he was the owner was a pharmacist himself. He was Armenian too, and so I started working at the pharmacy there, and then he also had opened up a medical supply that was in Pasadena, right near my college. So I basically transferred to work there and then go to school. So I was working part time and going to school full time. I had a full, I think, 16 units at the
Wow.
time. Yeah, and so basically I was doing working, and I was literally up at like 3 o'clock in the morning studying, so it was just a lot. And so but I at the time when I graduated high school, I was the first semester of my high school year, because I had taken so many classes. My first semester, I only had 4 classes. So it was nice. I didn't even have a full, because I had taken all of my classes. So I only had 4 classes left for that semester. And second semester high school year, I was actually an early grad. So I started going to college. And then I came back and graduated with my class in June. I walked with my class in June, but second
Wow.
semester high school year, I didn't attend high school anymore because I didn't need to. I pretty much had all of my classes done. And so I was all ready to go, so I didn't worry about staying or what was I going to take. So I'm like, let me get a head start. Of course, as you know myself, let me start college and get my classes going. Um, but I worked and went to school for about 2 years, and then I got married to my boyfriend at the time of 2 years, and he was actually the son of my like I was telling you prior to that, his dad had helped us buy a lot of the things in our apartment. So our dads actually grew up together back home, and so when we came here, we were super close. And he had a brother as well, so they would pretty much take care of me. And so it just so ended up being where we kind of started liking each other. And um, I was thinking, I'm new here. I don't know anyone. Who am I going to marry that my parents are going to be okay with? At least they know their family. They know our dads grew up together. They're very familiar with each other. So that was kind of my thought process. And so I ended up he ended up going to the military. He was in the Air Force, and so he figured that he was actually going to school as well. He went to DeVry for technical IT work, and so and because he went to DeVry, he ended up getting a job. Going into the Air Force with a job, because you have to have a job when you go in. And he ended up, he was working in some top secret, he had a top secret clearance, and he was going through he was going to be stationed in Colorado Springs, in NORAD. I'm sure a lot of people know NORAD. It's about a mile into the mountain. So anyway, so he ended up going into the Air Force and kind of getting himself situated. And then after he came back after basic training, and then we got married. It was super fast. We got engaged and we got married within 5 months.
Wow.
So we had to get everything ready. And so I moved to Colorado with him. And 9 months later, I had a baby girl. And I lived there for about 4 years. And I worked at, so I transferred there to Walgreens Pharmacy. I was working there, and I was also, I was a pharmacy technician at Walgreens, and I was also going to school at the same time to get my degree and try to finish my degree, because I had only gone for like 2 years to college at the time before I got married and moved. And and then I moved back 6 months before he was discharged from the military, because I had to come back and find an apartment and for us to settle in. And those were some really tough times. It was challenging, right? Not having anybody there to help. And I had to work in Colorado Springs as well. So I was working part time to help out, because, obviously military income isn't a lot for us to be able to really live off of. So he was working nights sometimes, and I was working during the day. We would kind of switch off to take care of the baby because we had no one to help us. It was just us. It was just him and I. And so, and then when I transferred back to get us an apartment and kind of get ourselves situated, obviously mom and dad helped me because they were already here. And so I got an apartment for us, and I actually got a job. I transferred from Walgreens from Colorado Springs to California Walgreens. At the time, Walgreens was barely coming out. They had like the express ones. I don't know if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up getting a job in Monrovia in one of those express pharmacies. So, and at the time it was so scary because they had told me that they had gotten robbed. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, like every time somebody would come in, we would just kind of be worried, right? But everything was fine. Obviously, while I was there, I kind of transferred to there was a bigger store that opened up closer to me, so I ended up transferring there. And then at 23, I actually went to work for the county. I worked at Olive View Medical Center, and I was a pharmacy tech there for about 3 years. And that was really interesting experience, super busy. And then when I started working there, I started, speaking to a lot of the nurses there. And I was still taking classes for me to go to pharmacy school. That was the plan, for me to be going to pharmacy school. And as I had the pharmacy experience at this point, being in it for a few years, I started talking to the nurses, and I realized that there's just so much more out there that I could be doing and impacting. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, like, who wants to do this the rest of their life and counting pills? Like, I want to be impacting in a bigger way. I'm like, I really need to be getting into nursing, and, I really need to be this is my purpose. Like, I need to be able to give back. And so at 26, I went back to nursing school. And so that's kind of how my nursing career started.
The most fun way to watch us is on YouTube, so be sure to like and subscribe. Also, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and listen on Apple and Spotify as well. If you would like to learn more about a specific topic, please reach out to us by email. You can find all this information below in the show notes.